Disclaimer: this story is for entertainment purposes only. It is a fictional narrative created to engage viewers emotionally. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. I never imagined that a single night could change the way I looked at everything around me. It was supposed to be a normal evening, just another family gathering that ended a little later than planned. Everyone was tired, and the house was filled with the quiet hum of soft conversations and laughter that slowly faded as people began to drift to their rooms. I thought I would go to bed like any other night, but what happened afterward left me wide awake, questioning myself, my feelings, and the boundaries I thought were unshakable. My husband had asked his cousin to stay the night with us since it was late and he lived far away. I didn't think much of it. After all, he was family, someone I had seen countless times at gatherings and always considered just another familiar face. The guest room was already full, so arrangements were made for him to rest in the same room where I was. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, just a matter of convenience, a solution to a simple problem. But sometimes the smallest decisions lead to the most unforgettable moments. I remember lying down, trying to calm my thoughts, the room unusually silent. The faint light from the street lamp outside filtered in through the curtains, casting a dim glow across the walls. I could hear his breathing, steady and calm, only a few feet away. At first, I didn't pay attention, convincing myself there was nothing unusual about the situation. But as the minutes passed, I became strangely aware of his presence. My heart beat a little faster, not because anything had happened yet, but because of what I was feeling, something I couldn't quite explain. The bed felt smaller than it really was. Every movement, every shift in the sheets seemed louder than it should have been. I told myself to relax, to close my eyes and fall asleep, but the harder I tried, the more restless I became. I turned slightly, careful not to make any sound, and in that moment I realized he hadn't moved at all. Not an inch. He just lay there, as though frozen, yet somehow fully aware of me. The air between us felt heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. I tried to steady my breathing, not wanting him to notice the uneasiness growing inside me. But my mind wouldn't let me rest. Why wasn't he moving? Why did it feel like he was waiting for something? I couldn't bring myself to look directly at him, so I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing faster than I could control. The closeness, the silence, the tension, it all built up until I wasn't sure if I wanted the night to end quickly or to stretch on forever just so I could make sense of what I was feeling. The truth is, I had never thought of him in that way before. He had always been my husband's cousin, someone I spoke to casually, nothing more. But now, lying so close in the quiet of the night, I realized how little I truly knew about him. His stillness was unsettling yet strangely comforting, as if he understood exactly what I was thinking but chose not to act on it. That unspoken connection was enough to keep me awake, wondering what it all meant. The silence seemed endless. I kept waiting for him to shift, to turn, to break the strange spell that hung in the air. But he didn't. He stayed exactly where he was, breathing slowly, like he was deep in thought or maybe even pretending to be asleep. My heart pounded harder with every passing second. I wanted to reach out, to say something, to break the tension, but the words caught in my throat. It was as though the night itself wanted to hold us in that moment, refusing to let either of us escape. At one point, I turned my back to him, hoping the distance would help me calm down. But even then, I could feel it, his presence. It was like a quiet energy, something I couldn't ignore no matter how much I tried. I pulled the blanket up higher, my mind a storm of emotions I couldn't put into words. I told myself to sleep, but my eyes refused to close. I was too aware, too caught up in a feeling I didn't understand but couldn't deny. The strangest part was that neither of us moved closer, yet neither of us moved away. It was as if some invisible line had been drawn, one that neither of us dared to cross but both of us silently acknowledged. And that line, that delicate space between us, held more weight than any words could have. Hours seemed to pass in that heavy silence, my mind growing more restless with each tick of the clock. Every time I thought about waking my husband or saying something, I stopped myself. I didn't know why. Maybe I was afraid of breaking the fragile stillness. Maybe I was afraid of what his response would be. Or maybe I was afraid of admitting that I felt something I shouldn't have. As the night dragged on, the tension never broke. He didn't move closer, he didn't move away, and neither did I. But the unspoken connection lingered, stronger than ever, leaving me with questions I wasn't ready to face. By the time the faint light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, I knew this night would stay with me forever. And that's where I'll leave you for now. Because what happened next is something I never saw coming. Do you want me to also continue with part 2 after this cliffhanger so you can keep the same suspenseful flow for your YouTube story series? I woke up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The faint light of dawn had turned into the bright rays of morning sun, filling the room with a warmth that felt almost too cheerful compared to the heaviness inside me. I lay still for a moment, trying to piece together the night before, wondering if I had imagined it all. But then I turned my head slightly and saw him. My husband's cousin was still there, lying on his side, his eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. He looked peaceful, almost unaware of the storm he had left me with. I quickly looked away, pretending to be asleep, though my heart raced as if I had been caught doing something wrong. He didn't move, not even a little. And that silence, that stillness, brought back the weight of everything I had felt the night before. It wasn't what he did that unsettled me, it was what he didn't do. He hadn't said a word, hadn't crossed a line, hadn't even touched me. And yet, somehow, I felt like everything had changed. Later that morning, the house was buzzing again. The smell of breakfast drifted from the kitchen, and voices carried through the hallway as the rest of the family woke up. I tried to shake off the uneasiness, forcing myself to act normal. He eventually got up, greeted everyone as though nothing had happened, and joined the table with an easy smile. No one else seemed to notice anything different. Only I carried the memory of the long night we had shared in silence. I kept stealing glances at him, searching for some sign, some clue that maybe he had felt it too. But he was calm, relaxed, laughing with my husband and chatting like it was just another day. I wondered if I was imagining it all, if maybe the weight I felt was only mine to carry. And yet, every time our eyes almost met, I felt that same pull, that same quiet awareness that had kept me awake all night. Throughout the day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My husband was busy with errands, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I replayed the night over and over in my mind. The silence, the stillness, the closeness, it was all so vivid, like it had been etched into me. I asked myself why it mattered so much. Why did his presence linger in my mind when he had done absolutely nothing wrong? Later in the afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen preparing tea. He walked in quietly, his footsteps barely making a sound. For a moment, it was just the two of us again, and I froze, unsure of what to say. He smiled politely, asked if I needed help, and reached for a cup. Our hands brushed, just for a second, and though it was the most innocent touch, my heart skipped a beat. I pulled away quickly, hoping he hadn't noticed, but the look in his eyes told me he had. It wasn't bold or obvious, just a flicker, a quiet acknowledgement that only I seemed to understand. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to stay busy, keeping myself surrounded by others so I wouldn't have to face him alone again. But the truth was, I was hyper-aware of him the entire time. Every laugh, every word, every time he passed by, it all felt magnified. And yet, he never gave anything away. He acted normal, as if the night before hadn't meant anything. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had. That evening, as the sun set and the house quieted once more, I felt the tension return. He was staying another night, and the thought made my chest tighten. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was overthinking, but I couldn't help the unease building inside me. Would it be the same as before? Another night of silence and stillness, heavy with unspoken thoughts? Or would something change? When it came time to sleep, I felt the same rush of nervous energy I had the night before. The room was dim again, the faint glow of the street lamp casting long shadows. I lay on my side, facing away, determined to fall asleep quickly. But once again, I felt him there. The quiet breathing, the steady stillness, it all came back, just as strong as before. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself not to think about it, but the harder I tried, the more aware I became. Every sound outside seemed amplified, every shift of the sheets louder than it should have been. I waited for him to move, to break the silence, but he didn't. He lay there, as though he was waiting too. The hours ticked by, and I felt myself caught between wanting to say something and being too afraid of what it might lead to. My thoughts were tangled, a mix of curiosity, fear, and something I didn't want to name. I thought about my husband, about the life we had built, and yet here I was, wide awake beside his cousin, feeling things I had never expected. At one point, I thought I heard him shift slightly, but when I held my breath to listen, the room fell silent again. I didn't turn to check. I couldn't. It was easier to keep staring at the darkness, pretending I wasn't aware, even though my heart told a different story. By the time the first signs of dawn crept through the curtains again, I knew another sleepless night had passed. The tension hadn't broken, the silence hadn't faded, and the distance between us still felt impossibly heavy. And yet, a part of me couldn't deny it, I was waiting for something. Waiting for him to say a word, to move, to do anything that would finally break the stillness we were both trapped in. But he didn't. He stayed just as he had before, leaving me with the same questions, the same storm of thoughts I wasn't ready to face. The truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending it was nothing. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't. Would you like me to continue this with part 3, where the tension deepens further and the stakes get higher without resolving it yet? The next morning felt heavier than the last. I went about my routine as if everything was normal, but inside, I carried a storm. My husband was cheerful, making plans for the day, while I forced myself to smile and nod, all the while stealing quick glances at his cousin. He was polite and calm, speaking with ease, as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet, every time his eyes met mine, even for the briefest moment, I felt a rush of warmth I couldn't explain. It unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Throughout breakfast, I tried to focus on conversations, but my mind kept drifting back to the night. I remembered lying awake, listening to his breathing, and the strange comfort and tension it brought. Now, sitting across from him in broad daylight, I couldn't decide if I should convince myself it meant nothing, or if I should accept that something unspoken was happening between us. Later, when most of the family gathered in the living room, my husband excused himself to run errands again, leaving me in the company of his cousin. Others were around, but I felt his presence as though he were the only one there. He didn't say anything unusual, but every word, every glance, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. It was as if we were having a silent conversation that no one else could hear. In the afternoon, I stepped outside to water the plants, hoping the fresh air would clear my thoughts. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and it was him. He smiled lightly and offered to help. I nodded, though I didn't need help, and we worked side by side in silence. The air between us felt charged, though neither of us crossed any lines. It was the closeness, the awareness, that made my hands tremble as I held the watering can. I wondered if he noticed, but I was too afraid to ask. As the day went on, I found myself questioning everything. Why was I feeling this way? Why did the silence between us feel louder than words? I thought about my husband, about how much he trusted me, and guilt settled in my chest. Yet no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop noticing every detail about his cousin, his calmness, the way he listened, the quiet respect he carried. It was maddening to feel drawn to someone without a single word being spoken about it. That evening, while preparing dinner, I overheard him talking to another family member in the next room. His laugh echoed through the hall, deep and genuine, and I felt a strange pull inside me. I quickly busied myself with the cooking, hoping no one could see the flush on my cheeks. When he entered the kitchen to grab a plate, our eyes met again, just for a second, and it felt like the whole room stopped. Neither of us spoke, but in that moment, I knew we were both aware of the tension that refused to fade. Night came again, and with it, the same heavy silence. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind. Once again, he didn't move closer, and he didn't move away. The space between us was the same, but it felt smaller than ever. I tried to calm myself, reminding myself of my marriage, of the life I had built, but my heart wouldn't listen. Every second stretched endlessly, each breath a reminder that he was right there, sharing the same silence, the same restless thoughts. I wondered if he was lying awake too, thinking about the same questions I was. Did he feel the pull? Or was it all in my head? I wanted to know, but I didn't dare break the silence. The risk of saying something, of changing everything, was too great. So I stayed still, trapped between fear and curiosity, knowing that this unspoken conflict was slowly growing stronger with each passing night. As dawn broke once more, I realized something that frightened me. I didn't want him to leave yet. The thought of the silence ending, of going back to life as if nothing had happened, left me with an ache I couldn't explain. And yet, I knew this couldn't last. The real conflict wasn't just the silence between us. It was inside me, between loyalty and curiosity, between what I knew was right and what I secretly wanted to feel. And as I watched the morning light creep into the room, I knew the tension wasn't fading. It was only building, waiting for the moment when neither of us could ignore it any longer. Would you like me to continue in part 4, where the pressure intensifies even more and new complications deepen the suspense without resolving it yet? The next day felt different, heavier somehow, as if the walls of the house themselves knew the silence that had stretched between us for 2 nights. My husband had to leave early for work, leaving me and his cousin in the house with only a few other family members coming and going. The air felt charged, every sound in the house echoing louder than it should, every glance carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. I tried to keep myself busy, cleaning the kitchen, folding laundry, doing anything that would keep my mind distracted. But no matter what I did, I was always aware of him, aware of where he was, what he was doing, and when he walked into the same room as me. It was strange how even silence could feel so loud. When our eyes met, even briefly, I felt my breath catch in my throat, and I looked away too quickly, afraid that someone else might notice. By afternoon, most of the house was quiet. I sat in the living room with a book in my hands, though I hadn't turned a page in nearly half an hour. I sensed him before I even looked up, and when I did, he was standing in the doorway, watching me for just a second before stepping inside. He asked if he could sit, his voice calm, casual, but it made my heart race. I nodded, unable to find the right words. He sat across from me, the silence wrapping around us again. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy, meaningful, the kind of silence that carried all the questions we were both too afraid to ask. I could feel his eyes on me, steady but not invasive, and I gripped the edges of my book just to keep my hands from shaking. My chest felt tight, the room suddenly too small, too warm, as though the walls were pushing us closer even without movement. When someone passed through the hallway, the spell broke for a moment, and I quickly shifted my gaze, pretending to be absorbed in my book. But as soon as we were alone again, the tension returned, stronger than before. I knew we were both holding back, caught in the middle of something unspoken that neither of us dared to voice. That night, as the house fell silent once again, I knew it was going to be the hardest night yet. I lay in bed, staring at the faint light through the curtains, my heart pounding louder than ever. He was there, just as he had been the nights before, quiet and unmoving. But this time, the silence felt unbearable, almost demanding. My thoughts raced, torn between fear of what might happen and the undeniable pull that made it impossible to close my eyes. Every sound, every shift in the sheets made my pulse quicken. I could feel that he wasn't asleep, even though neither of us spoke. The tension had built to a point where it could no longer be ignored, and I knew, sooner or later, something had to break. Would you like me to take part 5 into the climax itself, where the unspoken tension finally reaches its peak? Just when I thought the silence between us couldn't get any heavier, something unexpected happened that changed everything. That night, as I lay wide awake listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, I suddenly heard a faint knock at the door. My heart jumped. No one ever came to our room that late. I froze, unsure of whether to respond, but before I could move, the door creaked open slightly, and I saw the shadow of another family member in the dim light. It was my sister-in-law, looking for something she had left behind earlier in the evening. She whispered softly, asking if I was awake, and I quickly sat up, hoping my face didn't reveal the storm inside me. He remained still, pretending to sleep, and I wondered if she noticed the tension in the room. She stepped in for a moment, grabbed what she needed, and then left, closing the door gently behind her. But that tiny interruption was enough to make my heart race even faster. What if she had stayed longer? What if she had sensed the strange silence? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. After the door shut, the room felt different. The tension wasn't just between us anymore, it carried the weight of being caught, the fear of someone else noticing. The silence now had a sharp edge, filled not only with unspoken feelings but also with the risk of discovery. As the night dragged on, I realized the stakes had grown higher. It wasn't just about what I was feeling anymore. It was about what could happen if someone else sensed it too. And with each passing moment, the thought of being exposed made the silence between us even more dangerous. Do you want me to continue into part 6, where this new tension pushes the story right to the edge of its climax? That night felt different from the very beginning. The silence between us had stretched too long, too heavy, and I knew it couldn't stay unbroken forever. I lay in bed, staring at the faint glow from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I could sense he was awake too, his steady breathing giving him away. For a long moment, neither of us moved, the air so tense it felt like it might shatter with a single word. Finally, he whispered my name, softly, almost as though he wasn't sure if he should. My breath caught, and I turned slightly, meeting his eyes in the dim light. The unspoken tension of the past nights was suddenly right there between us, undeniable and impossible to ignore. I felt the weight of everything, my marriage, my family, the trust placed in me, colliding with the truth of what had been growing in silence. Before either of us could say more, a sudden knock came at the door. My heart dropped. My husband's voice called from the hallway, saying he had come home earlier than expected. Panic rushed through me. We both froze, realizing how dangerously close we had come to crossing a line we couldn't undo. I quickly pulled the blanket higher and forced myself to stay calm as my husband stepped inside. He smiled, tired from the long day, and sat down beside me, completely unaware of the storm that had just been moments away from breaking. His cousin remained still, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. As I sat there, forcing a smile, I realized the truth, the silence had saved us. But the twist was clear in my heart, it wasn't over. Because even though nothing had happened, the feelings we hadn't spoken lingered, stronger than ever, waiting for another chance to surface. Do you want me to now write a final closing part that gives a thought-provoking ending and leaves your audience with something to reflect on? When my husband came into the room that night, the tension that had been building for days suddenly shifted. His presence grounded me, reminding me of the life we had built together, the trust we shared, and the promises I had made. As he spoke about his day, I forced myself to listen, grateful for the normalcy of his voice, even as my mind still echoed with the silence I had shared with his cousin. The next morning, his cousin packed his things to leave. Our eyes met briefly, and in that fleeting moment, I knew we both understood what had almost happened. There were no words, no confessions, no explanations, just a quiet acknowledgement that the silence between us had been real, but it could never go further. He gave a small, respectful nod before stepping out of the door, leaving behind a memory that would never truly fade. As the days passed, I found myself thinking less about the tension and more about what it had taught me. Temptation doesn't always come loudly, it often arrives in silence, testing boundaries we never thought we'd question. I realized how easily lines can blur if we aren't careful, and how important it is to protect the trust of those we love. In the end, nothing happened, but the weight of what almost did stayed with me. It reminded me to cherish the love I already had, to guard it fiercely, and to never underestimate the power of silence. Because sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. Would you like me to also craft a YouTube description for this story that's optimized for clicks and SEO?